Hello.
Hello, Ian. How we doing today?
What's going on?
Not a whole lot. I know we finally have some mailbag. We should just address that right at the top.
Mailbag. It's so exciting. So we have a email. Let's jump right into it. From Joel Claremont. I assume that's how he says it. It's always fun to say people's names on.
I would say Claremont.
Claremont. Maybe it's Joel
That's
Claremont.
what I would say.
All right, Joel Claremont. He can follow up with more mailbag about how to say his name.
It's infinite mailbags if we just pronounce people's names wrong every time.
Exactly. That's good content. All right, so he had a question. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the summary of it is basically that he has a podcast for devs, and which we do too. And he's been doing it for a few years. It's called No Compromises, and he's just basically wondering how to kind of increase the subscriber growth. And I think just in general, this kind of applies even beyond podcasts, but like audience growth in general. Sounds like he kind of does the regular stuff now, post on social media and some SEO stuff. So, I don't know. What do you think about that? I know we've talked a little bit about kind of marketing and things like that in general, and audience growth. But what are your thoughts on kind of specifics around how things he might try?
Yeah, so some of the things we're doing for this podcast, like we take this video and we put it on YouTube. And I think that's a good distribution strategy. But I don't think that's like a native YouTube strategy. I think the trick is people that already know us and want to listen or watch the podcast could go to YouTube and do that, but I don't think we're gaining much like in terms of net subscribers by putting it on YouTube. And I feel like that's kind of the hard part with podcasts. I've done a few now and it feels like you just have to bring your audience to the podcast instead of using the podcast to grow your audience. I think if it were like, I don't know, if it were like a more generally applicable podcast, like a, murder or crime podcast or something, like then you can pick up new audience members. But I feel like with these dev podcasts, it's kind of hard to like break out of, the iTunes new and noteworthy category or something. And so all the stuff that Joel says he's doing, put it on social media, newsletter, that kind of stuff. I feel like that's what you have to do. You just have to talk about it in all the other places that you're at, and people that are in your audience will listen. I don't know if is that like a downer take that podcasts aren't going to grow your audience? Is that bad? What do you think?
I don't know. I'm a little torn. I sort of think I definitely agree early on. So he's like 3 years into it, so it's definitely beyond kind of early on. But like you're bringing your audience in, but so just in that, I do think there's actually huge value there because it does like, those are kind of like your hardcore audience, right? It's like the people who follow you on Twitter, fine. Like, there's thousands of them in our cases and they follow us and that's fine. But then the group that then follows us here and spends an hour with us, right? Like that's a group that's really very interested in what we have to say and things like that. And so I think there's a lot of value in having that relationship with the kind of hardcore group that is interested in what you're doing. But yeah, it is definitely a little bit harder, I think, in dev to break out wider. Certainly you're not likely to ever be featured, by Apple or something like that. But I mean, there are podcasts that do it. I do think you kind of have to hook maybe a little bit to something. So like whether it's, in our world, like we kind of hook whatever new stuff in Laravel, we'll probably talk about that. And every time that happens, we'll grow a little bit potentially there. Or like you see, like obviously Apple podcasters, there's a lot of those. And every time Apple does something, then they grow a little bit because people are interested in the new iPhone or whatever. So I do think there is a little bit of some strategies there of like the topics you cover and how that can maybe help. But yeah, a lot of it is just kind of grinding away at it. Definitely in my previous podcast, it was pretty slow and steady type thing, but not huge. The one thing about YouTube that's kind of nice is you get an actual subscriber count, which is sort of cool. Even though I agree it's not going to the algo is probably not going to push your podcast super far and wide. But and then you do get things like clips that you can share on social media and stuff. So I do think the video is sort of interesting. Gives you another thing to do on social media other than just say, hey, we have a podcast. It's like, no, like throughout the week, you can drop a few clips of the video, and that's kind of cool. And we've definitely had people pick up the videos and make their own clips from it and share where we talked about them, for example, or things like that. So gives
Yeah,
other
that's
people a
true.
way to share it a bit. So
Here's a
yeah,
principle. Here's a principle I wanna run by you.
yeah,
Podcasts are for deepening audience connection and not broadening your audience. How does that strike you?
yeah. I think that's
Seems
like
right.
true for the majority of them. Yeah.
And here's a bit of trivia. Did you know a long time ago, like 2016 maybe, I had a
Okay.
podcast called the Music Makers Podcast, which had nothing to do with music.
Okay.
And
Wow. I didn't even know
it,
about this one.
yes, it was basically I would find articles that I liked and found like inspirational, and I would
Mm.
read the article for the first part of the podcast and then talk about application to my life in the second part of the podcast. And I got featured in iTunes. Like iTunes reached out
Wow.
to me, sent me an email and was like,
Very
"Hey,
cool.
send us all of your assets. We want to put you in like the new and noteworthy. We're going to do a little banner for you in the iTunes store." And
Wow.
it was a big deal. Yeah, it was very very
That's
cool.
cool.
It was non-dev, like it was super non-dev, but it was a fun podcast and I did I think 50 episodes solo of
Wow.
that. Yeah. There you go.
And how did that go? How did that impact the podcast? So when you got featured on New and Noteworthy,
I don't remember exact numbers, but it was like it was a big step change
it
for
helped. Yeah.
sure. Yeah, and it definitely helped. Back then I didn't have any audience at all, so it was just like
Right.
friends and family. And this just took it to a whole new level, which was cool. It was
There
a
you
lot of fun.
go. You never know what
Yeah,
may happen. That's all
yeah,
part of the putting yourself out there, right? You put yourself out
exactly.
there. Which I think that's also like the other benefit of the podcast. I've definitely found over the years that they're just like, yeah, it's obviously just another way to put yourself out there. You never know who might pick it up. A lot of
Yep.
times it's only, a break comes from just one person learning about what you're doing or whatever. And so you don't necessarily need, 100,000 listeners to make it very valuable potentially. So yeah, that's just like putting it out there, you talking about your stuff and what you're doing and practicing that. So there are these other advantages to it for sure.
Yeah,
What do
big
you think?
time.
One thing he did say is that they do it every 2 weeks. And I sort of
Mm,
feel like that's not the best way to go about a podcast in terms of if you really want to
yeah.
grow it. I kind of feel like you need the weekly. I think there's like that element of people just want to be in a groove with you.
Yeah.
Um,
And he
but
said 10 to 15 minutes every 2 weeks, and that's not enough for me.
right,
If you did an hour every 2 weeks, that's better. But I think
right,
if you're gonna do 10 to 15 minutes, um, I would do it weekly for sure.
yep,
Because I think part of it, I feel like part of the benefit of a podcast is like getting to know the personalities of the people.
right,
And if you keep it to 10 to 15 minutes, you're probably just focused strictly on the content and you do it every 2 weeks and it's like, I don't
yep,
really
yep.
feel
I
like I know
agree.
these guys.
And the upside of if it is if you like that 15-minute format, then I mean just record two at once, right? Like I would just be
Yeah,
recording two at
totally.
once, and then whatever, you have the second 15-minute chunk for the next week, and then you just have your weekly episode, and it's not really that much more work. You're still
Yeah.
done like half an hour a week, so plus a little editing. All right, cool. Well, that was cool. I like the mailbag, so don't forget you can mail us at of course now it's hidden.
Wow, so that's
Mostly
somewhere.
technical podcast at gmail.com. So send in your feedbacks.
The other feedback that I have gotten
Mm.
privately a bunch is on the
Mm.
ha segment and the ha inflation. I got a lot of people messaging me about that one. And there were some good nuances. There were some good nuances about like group chats. Are tap backs appropriate in a group chat? Because if everyone responds with a
Yeah.
individual text, is that too much? I thought that was viable. The other one was the Ha scale being relative but internally consistent. So like maybe your Ha scale is different, but you're internally consistent. So you kind of have to learn, each person's Ha scale, which I
Yeah,
buy. I find
that's
that yeah, it
fair.
doesn't have to be absolute. And then the
Yeah.
final one is the LOL verifier. Did you
Right.
watch this video?
Yeah, that was really funny.
So funny. So we got a tweet that is like it's a funny video. It's like basically like a gag video, but it's a real thing where a guy makes a little device that verifies if you laughed out loud before you're allowed to like type LOL, and then it'll like stamp it with verified laugh out loud.
I like it.
So,
That's so cool.
I found that to be very, very funny. So lots of good feedback. I think Joe Mazzoletti sent us that one. Lots of good feedback on the haha segment of the show.
You never know what's gonna strike people's fancy. This is why we got to cover all the topics. We can't be just in one silo here. I think that was definitely a lot of people out there talking about that. I think I don't know. I'm still torn on the Tap Pack. I mean, I occasionally do use them in a group, and when I do use them is in a group setting, like mostly with my family actually. So I can get behind that. Internally consistent, I can also mostly get behind.
I have also been told, Ian, I got an inside. I got a leak. That told me that you're the king of the ambiguous heh. H-E-H. I was told that you do that a lot, and it is inscrutable. Nobody understands what it means.
I know. This is this used to be quite a thing when Taylor worked at Userscape and Eric, and they would get quite flustered by the HE or the HEH, and we're not sure what to make of that. I do like to put the HEH in there. I don't do it as much anymore. I feel like I've gotten more consistent on the Ha scale in recent years, but yeah, I would say the HEH was kind of my Ha, like a single Ha equivalent. But it did, that used to be more of a thing, and they are not. Your sources are correct.
Well, some people are still scarred because I got the DM that was like, Ian didn't even mention his ambiguous "heh," and I was like, what?
we all have secrets in our closet. We all have dark casts in different areas. I mean, so
if you want to be a whistleblower against Ian, DM me and I will happily bring it up on the show. So all whistleblowers will be kept anonymous.
I love it. Yes, all the secrets could come out here on the pod.
That's right.
Yeah, I did. Because there is that element of like, it's like the single Ha. I don't know where I got even the HEH, but yeah. But it was my Ha sort of shorthand. Acknowledgement.
Yeah, the HEH is like the sound of a single exhale, like shoulder raise drop, like huh. Like that is HEH versus HA. So I get it. But yeah, ambiguous in text.
I like it.
Yeah.
We got informants on the podcast now.
I know, it's great.
It's a whole the sort of network effects here are happening. All right. So what do we got here on do I want to cover next? Do you want to cover some of your news, or do you want to jump into the Laravel stuff?
We can go anywhere. We got to talk about a little bit of Laravel stuff this week. Right. There's some drama, but we can go to any one that you want. So you lead the way. Well,
let's do the Laravel stuff together. So why don't we cover your news first, and then we'll jump into some Laravel stuff.
Okay. So shall we start with the big breaking news? Hello Query, as we know it, is dead. R.I.P. So this is the SaaS thing that I've been working on with Colleen, and used to be called Hammerstone, and we pivoted to Hello Query, and then it's over for me, at least. There's, Colleen might carry on this particular product, or she might carry on with a slightly different version of this product, or whatever. But for me, it is finished. I am done working on a SaaS product for now. So, yeah.
Well, I guess so. What led you to this decision? I know you've done a podcast. You don't have to go through fully in depth because you and Colleen did do a podcast that kind of covered the details, I think. But maybe you could just give us a little summary of kind of what your thinking was there. And
I was burnt out on that particular idea / project. So we've been working on it for forever. And I think that's one of the things is we've been working on it for too long. And we went through these twists and turns of like, we're basically just doing consulting for the big client. And then it was like, okay, we've dropped consulting, and then we try to sell this thing as a standalone, and it's like, not really finding product market fit. Nobody wants it. Let's pivot. And by the time it was like, okay, we've done all of this, and let's pivot and rebuild a completely new product. And it got to the point where it was like, we're about to like relaunch this thing, and I'm out of steam on this idea. Yeah. And we're approaching the starting line, and I'm not excited. Like, I'm not excited about what comes next. So,
yeah.
In some regards, it's like you approach the starting line and you finally finish building, and now you get to go do the fun stuff. Like, I did not feel that at all.
Right.
Like, oh no, now we get to go do the hard stuff.
Yeah.
And I think I have like simultaneously kind of realized what is appropriate for this time in my life and what is appropriate for the next 2 months from now of my life. And SaaS, like, structurally doesn't fit quite as well as content does, because content can be finished, like you can do it and it can be done. And SaaS is a lot more demanding. Plus, it's not even off the ground yet, so it's going to be doubly demanding. Like, if I could enter maintenance mode on a SaaS product, that's one thing, but still, like, fixing initial bugs and fielding initial requests on a SaaS product while I'm, have 4 kids. When we started this thing, Colleen and I had 0 kids,
right.
And I'm about to have 4, and it hasn't been that long. It's only been like 2 or 3 years, so.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. I mean, I know obviously we've talked about it. Everybody always says this about you, that you have such an incredible amount of things going on. So I think narrowing down the focus a little bit certainly makes sense. And obviously 100% right, of course, that just getting to the starting line when you sort of get the shippable version of the product. I mean, I think there's, I was at this talk, which is one of the most famous talks ever, I think, about SaaS, called The Long, Slow SaaS Rampant Death by Gail Goodman. And definitely a talk everybody should go check out if you're going to do SaaS. But, and I don't, this is like years ago now, but I still think not much has really changed with the basics of it, which is that, when you start, it's going to be really slow, because ultimately the whole deal with SaaS is to accumulate those dollars over many years. And so when you get those first customers who pay you $200 a month or $300 a month or $99 a month, like, it's obviously not a lot of money until you get that to compound and so on. So, so, and that's Hello Query is a high level of difficulty SaaS, I would
extremely.
say. That was going to require a lot of enterprise sales and all those kind of things. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of technical. This isn't like the kind of SaaS you throw up there and it's like, oh, it pretty much runs itself. Like, there's some bug fixes or whatever. Like, this was going to be deep in the bowels of other people's architecture.
Connecting to people's databases directly,
right. Getting through security protocols and everything else. Yeah. So it's going to be a lot going on there, performance stuff and everything else. So
totally.
Really hard problem. So yeah, I think it makes total sense. And I think it's really good on your part to recognize that, and before... it's even leaving her at least in a reasonable spot here too, of like, she can continue and so on if she wants. And so you're not like, 6 months in and there are paying customers.
Right. And I'm the one who built it. And then I'm like, see ya, good luck. Yeah, I know.
So I think that makes sense. So, okay, well.
And this lines up with my galaxy quadrant theory.
We should talk about that, yeah.
Yeah, so... This also, like, I feel like I've got a lot of good things going right now, and many of them are pointed in the same direction, except for toiling away in private on a SaaS product, right? And so that's another thing that I have trying to be thoughtful about recently is, what are the efforts and how many of those efforts can I point directionally in a similar way? And so like when Colleen and I were having these talks about Hello Query, that's the time when the video stuff that I've been doing, both for Planet Scale and for my personal YouTube and for screencasting, that's when all of that really started to like take off. And I started to think, wait, maybe my best and highest use of time is on video content or content in general, instead of SaaS. Like we've talked a number of times on this show about how many other people are better programmers than I am. Like Boris and Jason they just do stuff better. And I kind of realized, wait, maybe I should do the thing that only I can do seemingly, which is be me on video.
Right.
And so like trying to point all of the vectors the same way, and the SaaS was basically pointed the opposite direction. And so like the audio enhancing app on Flowtone, screencasting, my personal YouTube, Planet Scale YouTube, all of that goes one direction. And this is the Galaxy Quadrant theory that I kind of operate by, but have never named, but it's a great name. The Galaxy Quadrant
I
theory.
feel like there's
Great
a whole
name. I know.
world of content to be created and brand to be built around the Galaxy Quadrant.
Yes, I do. I love that. So the Galaxy Quadrant theory, I was having a hands-on screencasting call with Simon Hamp, who's a Laravel community member, and was basically explaining like my theory of projects. And it's a theory of projects, but it's also a theory of preserving and increasing optionality and optimizing for success, even if I don't know what the final outcome looks like. And what I was telling him was basically like, I am pointed in this direction. And right now that direction is like content, video. I'm pointed in that direction. I don't know exactly, which star I'm aiming for, but I know that I'm going to this part of the sky. Like I'm pointed to this quadrant of the galaxy. I don't know exactly what the final monetizable outcome or career defining outcome is, but I feel like good things are happening on this route. And so I'm going to point as many vectors towards that route as possible. And along the way, I may make adjustments and may decide like, I got to steer off this way a little bit. But in terms of what is the single thing that I'm optimizing for, I don't really know. I just know that I'm headed in that direction and it seems to be going well. And so I'm going to continue to go that way. And we'll find out along the way.
Yeah, and I think, even like a step back from that, I almost feel like the Galaxy Quadrant idea of like you sort of started with not simultaneously, but this sort of an even wider quadrant of like Laravel stuff almost, because like Hammerstone was like Laravel plugins, components sort of thing, and then obviously you were doing content stuff and all that. And so then it's like, okay, you're seeing what works and what doesn't, and now it's like, okay, the content stuff is the stuff that's really like taking off, and so then you write the quadrant, like you narrow down into that like the quadrant becomes another quadrant, right? So now that quadrant is going to be which parts of the content world work best and things like that. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and I really do like that visualization of it. I think that's really good, especially nowadays where like there are these different avenues to take, and if you're not of the mindset of like SaaS or bust and you're open to other paths, then it's especially good there, because to build the SaaS kind of requires a lot of kind of full-on effort, and it's hard to have other things going really. But content is definitely different, or you could do like you could have consulting plus content or whatever. There's all different things you could be doing, but or like one-off products and things like that, where you could maybe do a couple at once and start to see what shakes out.
Yep. I'm a big believer in the notion that like motion begets more motion, and so as long as you're in motion, you can kind of like, it's easier to change where you're headed. The downside of that is it sometimes looks frenetic and embarrassing to like change direction, and that's just like shut it publicly saying I'm stopping this project I've been working on for years. Not super fun,
right.
But way better to do that than to stand still and wait for what is the perfect idea, which will never be the perfect idea. So being in motion, I feel like even if the direction is not fully known or is maybe incorrect for now, being in motion is better than just like standing around waiting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also, like you said, like making those hard decisions is super important. And I think like you could take the wrong lesson from it, which I think most people are kind of inclined to do, which is like, oh, I shouldn't do things in public because then like if it doesn't happen or it goes poorly or whatever, then, you know, I'll be embarrassed or it'll hurt the business in some way or whatever. But, you know, I think rare exceptions aside, that's almost never true because it's just like, there's so many other benefits to being out there and talking about things. And so an inspiration here of getting out there and trying things, and sometimes
they don't all work, but sometimes you'll find some that do, and that's the whole point.
And persistence. I mean, I was just randomly what was it? I was searching for some Laravel thing with like the morphing system the other day. And I randomly am on like Laravel News, like came up first in the Google search, and like you wrote this article.
I did, yeah.
And I was like, wait a minute, he's everywhere. I can't escape him.
Listen, I've been toiling in the salt mines for many, many years.
Yes,
so
you've been
my digital
persistent.
detritus is everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing, right? It always just seems like, oh, this person, like they're just shooting up, and that, you know, where'd they come from? But it's like, no, actually. They've been plugging away at it for years and years,
man.
You know?
Plugging away.
Trying the different angles, seeing how to make it work. And sometimes it's like one thing helps you a little bit and then it, you know, it stops working, and then, but it builds you up to a certain level, and then, you know, use that as the next jumping point, onto the next thing. So. All right, well, that's a good update there. Definitely the Galaxy Quadrant theory.
I know, I gotta flesh that out. That's good.
You really do. That's something that needs like a really big article or like a video. Maybe that's a video.
Maybe that is.
That would be a cool video.
We love a
visualizations.
Name. You know, with a name, you gotta have a name, and I love the name.
Having the name is like 90%. Like I can't do anything until I have the name. So like, I feel like you've got the name. And it makes a lot of sense, and it fits really nice, and it's like space. We can't go wrong with like
everybody loves space. Everybody loves space.
Exactly. So I feel like there's definitely something. Yeah, it's also very visual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it'd make a great video.
All right, I got a noodle on this because that's you can't pass up that name. Copyright, by the way. I just copyrighted it. That's how copyright works. So anyone listening, that's copyrighted now.
I like it. A book.
All right.
Podcasts, the whole thing. All right, so Laravel stuff. So we got Taylor returning to the podcast ring. We got to touch on that.
I know, the return of the king.
Return of the king.
Unbelievable.
Love Taylor on podcasts.
So do we know if it's a season thing? Because I know that Matt's Laravel podcast has been seasonal. So is this the season of Taylor?
You know, I should have checked with him, but I know that's what Matt was calling it. Like they were saying that, and I think even Taylor's tweet said something like that, like he'll be on the next season or something like that. So I think it is a season, but I don't know how many episodes he normally does. I can't recall if it's like 12 or something like that.
Something like that.
So I guess we'll see. But I guess if they, you know, are kind of really hit a groove that they might keep going, who knows? Or maybe they'll just stick with the season. But yeah, it's good to have him back. I think Taylor has like such a good audio voice. Always
he does.
Love him on audio. Yeah, and the first episode. I listened to it, and they did keep it pretty all Laravel business. So I'm hoping they open up next time with some spicy takes.
Yeah, they kept it on the straight and narrow until I feel like at the end they talked about final classes, and he was like, "This is stupid" or something like that. I was like, that's what I want to hear. Like I know what Folio is, I know what Volt is. Tell me stuff you think is stupid. That's what I want to hear.
That's what I want. Taylor's got excellent taste, so I want to know what he thinks is stupid or not stupid.
Yeah,
for sure. So definitely go check out the new Laravel podcast season. Got Matt and Taylor on there, and it's gonna be really good.
And while you're there, give them 3-star review and give us a 5-star review.
There we go.
Yeah, just so we keep it, you know, give us the relative advantage. You can listen to them, but don't let it go to their head.
They've got to earn their way up a little bit.
That's right. Who is this new guy, Taylor? Yeah. Come on, give me a break.
Wants to hear his take on Laravel. Come on, this is the spot for Laravel takes. Yeah. Crazy. All right, so we want to do final. What do you think about that?
Let's do it. Yeah, this is. I got a lot of thoughts on this.
Ooh,
I'll set the scene, and then you go thoughts, and then I'll go thoughts. So here's the deal. There's been a lot of discussion in the PHP community. I think the Laravel community. I'm not a part of the PHP community. I'm part of the Laravel community. I
Who
don't
we
know what's
lying
going on.
to?
Yeah, I don't know what's
Yeah.
going on outside of Laravel. There's been a lot of discussion in the Laravel community about marking classes as final, meaning they can no longer be extended by anyone ever at any time. And the discussion is kind of hinged around like open source maintainers or open source authors want to mark classes as final so that those implementations aren't extended, causing causing future maintenance burdens because people extend it and then you change a protected method and it's like, oh, I was relying on that. So that is one camp. The other camp is just leave it. Any open source library should leave all their classes not final, and I as the developer will accept the risk that if I extend your class, I'm taking on a certain amount of ownership here, and if you change a protected method, that's on me. And so that's kind of where the lines have come down, and boy have they come down hard. And so final classes, and you're going against the will of the open source maintainer, and you're restricting the freedom of the developer, and then there's this unfinalized class. But let's just start with that. So what are your thoughts so far?
Well, first of all, just super big picture. There's this concept. Actually, when Taylor worked at Userscape, we used to talk about this all the time, which is like what we do and then real programmers. And so real programmers would be like, you're at NASA and you fire rockets, right? You're sending stuff to the moon. You work at a military contractor. You're firing missiles into something. Maybe you work on software for nuclear reactors, whatever. Like, this is real serious programming stuff, right? And then there's like sort of the internet programming and like SaaS apps. And it's not that we're not serious, but at the same time, like, you know,
stakes are not that high.
You know, it's not, yeah, the stakes are down a notch. And I already feel like, even though this is not even that crazy of a thing, final, I already feel like we're getting into like this, like, that's like real programmer stuff, like final. Yeah. Like, I don't care what you do. Like, so my main take is I don't care. Like, if you want to put final, fine. Like, obviously it's your project, right? If it's your open source thing and you want to put final on everything, then I guess you'll do that, right? And so be it. I definitely prefer it to not be the case, because I think just the realities are that like sometimes you need to do stuff like that, and to ship the software to the customers you need to do the thing, and that sometimes, you know, then you just end up like copying and pasting and hacking around some other way anyway. You know, there's other hacky ways you do it. I haven't even looked into the unfinalized thing, other than that I saw it and I assume it's doing some similar hackiness of some sort. And so it's, you know, it's not like you can really prevent people from doing exactly. And I know like on Taylor's podcast, they also mentioned that he doesn't really buy it as a maintenance issue, and I would tend to agree. I'm definitely don't have a lot of huge open source projects, but yeah, I mean, if you use final or if you extend a class like that and hit a problem with a protected method or something, then that's
sucks
on
for you. Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, I'm not going to fix that for you because you broke it yourself. And so I think that's kind of a reasonable take to have there. And if you're doing that, like, that's obviously an area you want to have tests and things, because you know you're taking an extra risk in that the underlying code might change. And so you should be prepared for that. So yeah, that's kind of my take. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I'm excited to hear what you're thinking.
Ian, it is nonsense. This is so freaking stupid. I think it is the silliest thing in the world. This, like, I'm gonna mark these things final so that you don't accidentally do something that may be a little bit risky. Like, I'll be the arbiter of that. Like, let me decide if I'm gonna do something that seems risky, instead of making me jump through all of these hoops. Because here's part of the problem is they're like, you should just use composition over inheritance, and I'm like, one, what are you talking about? What does that even mean? Two, if you don't leave them all of every appropriate hook to be able to do that, you're hosed. Right. Like, you say use composition over inheritance, but then your library doesn't expose everything I need to actually do that. And it's like, okay, I would love to, but you didn't set it up right. And so that's frustrating to me. And then this whole, like, this whole notion of open source maintenance, like I don't buy it. I
Yeah.
didn't buy it personally, and then when Taylor said, "Hey, I've never really had that problem," I was like, "Okay, this is a straw man then," because if Taylor
Right.
doesn't have that problem across literally thousands of classes, you don't have that problem. And to the extent that you want to feel warm and fuzzy, I think there is like a final annotation that like makes the like contract explicit between you and the implementer. You can say like, this method is supposed to be final and is not like guaranteed backward compatibility, non-breaking stuff. Do that. Do that if you want to like give a warning to people that they can't use your stuff, but if they want to, like, the warranty is void, which
Right.
by the way, there are no warranties in open source. You can just close the issues. You can just say, "No, you did something stupid here, issue closed." And I don't know, this whole thing seems so silly to me. The place that I come down is, who cares? Like,
Right.
how do you have so much energy to care about this? I've got so many other things that I care about. And so the unfinalized thing, which is just a master troll, basically, is somebody created a package that after you composer install, which is our package manager, after you install all of your libraries, this package, unfinalized, will run a hook that goes through your entire vendor directory and removes all final class like annotations or declarations. And so then all of the final classes are now open for extension again. And it's just weird, like, arms race, because now people are talking about, okay, well, in your open source library, you can say that your library is not compatible with this unfinalized library. And then that way composer will say, we can't install both of these things. And it's like, guys, who cares? Who cares?
Well, I mean,
nobody cares.
Or
Makes
like
no
use a
sense to
different
me.
license. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like you put your stuff out there on MIT license. It's like, hold on.
Am I still here?
This is really weird. Now I have your video, but not your audio. Okay.
Uh-oh. Hello.
All right. I'll start back over there. What was that?
This is really weird. MIT.
Oh, yeah. Or use a different license, because MIT, the whole point of it is you can just take the code and do whatever you want. So, like, I mean, to block this guy's package is totally insane, because, like, that's the whole point of that license. There are other licenses that impose different restrictions, but then obviously the trade-off there is people probably won't use your package because then they don't want to deal with all those restrictions, which is kind of what's ended up happening. Things have mostly sorted out to being MIT is kind of the de facto standard license. We have to have an episode on licenses one day. I got a lot of rants on licenses, but anyway, yeah, the whole thing is kind of silly. Again, like, if this is the method that controls the nuclear launch code, like, go ahead, slap a file on that, baby. But I don't know, like some random open source thing that's going to be used for some standard CRUD stuff, like, I feel like it's okay. Let people get in there. It'll be all right.
Give them the sharp knives, and if they cut themselves, that's too bad.
Right.
Yeah, and it's different open source versus, in-house proprietary stuff, right? So if you're shipping open source, I feel like you may think what's like the use cases. You have no idea how people are actually going to use it and the weird things they're going to do. If you're in-house and you have 100 developers and you need certain things to be final so that people don't do things that will hurt the business, fine, do it. Great. I don't care. But yeah, this, like, I'm gonna protect the community from themselves because I am magnanimous. It's like, oh, come on. Boo.
Yeah, in-house is so different too, because it's like you can go to the group that controls that code and you can have the discussion and you can do all those things, and and somebody above all of you, right? The CEO or whoever can make a decision and say, listen, we're going to do this or we're not going to do that. And there's business reasons to do it. And obviously it's a lot different than just an open source package that you're just putting out there for people to use. I mean, literally according to the license, however they want. Like, that is the purpose of this open source project, is for people to use however they want. It's like right in there in the license agreement. So, I think obviously, you can final if you want, but I think it's not a lot of upside there most of the time.
No, y'all, we got better stuff to do. Y'all gotta move on. We got
chill.
Yeah, we don't want to. One, we don't want to be the JavaScript community and just devolve into infighting until we implode. And two, there's so much more interesting stuff to worry about. Like, let's just mend these differences and just forget about it.
So you brought up an interesting thing here with the PHP community, and I thought this maybe be interesting to touch on that for a second, because there's a couple of different things there. Is like, one is like, there's just these different huge elements. Like, to me, PHP is kind of like what you said. Like, it's Laravel. Like, the Laravel community is the PHP community. And then, but obviously, like, PHP is like 80% of the programming languages for the web are, done in PHP. So obviously WordPress being a huge part of that, but other libraries and systems and stuff as well. I don't know, I think Facebook is still somewhat on PHP and things like that. So there is this weird, and then a little beef I have with Cloudflare, and I love Cloudflare.
I know you do,
but they're
trying to look balanced here. So this is your faux outrage.
I should follow up with this just to be sure I'm 100% accurate here, but at least last time I checked, they have this sort of thing called Workers, which is kind of like Lambda or whatever, and but it doesn't like run PHP natively. I think there's some like hacky way to execute PHP in there, but you can't just natively run it. But of course, there's like JavaScript natively runs and Python and whatever, and a lot of the AI stuff too is Python.
Yep.
And it's like, what about PHP? Literally everybody knows PHP. Like 100% of web developers know PHP, and then
I know.
80% of the internet is actually run on PHP, and yet PHP is always getting shafted on these like modern systems. It's like, no, give PHP first class status. But so I don't know. What's your take on PHP community versus Laravel community, or as part of Laravel community and all that stuff?
Well, my first take is, nobody takes us seriously, and I don't get it. Right. And it's just like,
I don't get it.
What's the deal with that? It's so
bizarre.
interesting. Even that video I did about PHP doesn't suck anymore, when the Primogen did a reaction video to it, he was like, I haven't looked at PHP since 2012, and a lot of this is new to me, and it's pretty cool that PHP has all of this. And I'm like, come on, man.
It's out there.
Like, I don't think PHP is the greatest language in the world, but boy, does it work. Like, it works great. It does what I need it to do. And anyway. PHP community, I don't know the first freaking thing about the PHP community, except that they used to moan about Laravel all the time. Like, I remember a day when every week or every couple times a week, there would be these long fights on Reddit about like facades. And I think that's back when Laravel was still gaining like a foothold, or gaining market share rather, and people were trying to prevent that from happening. They were trying to tear it down, and I just don't see that much anymore. And I feel like to some extent Laravel has won, and I think for the Laravel community, because Laravel is now the de facto and has won in the PHP community, I think anytime we spend mudslinging about whether facades are correct or anything, I think that's losing. Like, it used to be a thing where Laravel was on equal footing with a few other things in the PHP community, and from my point of view, that's just not the case anymore. And so we don't need, like, the battle is over. We don't need to fight. And so I don't know much about what goes on in the PHP community outside of Laravel. I think there are other communities. Like, obviously there's the WordPress community, which is wholly distinct itself from the PHP community. Yeah. And I think that is probably more the case, that there are several large communities, but I don't know of I really just don't know of any, I am a native, like, raw PHP developer. Right. I actually don't know any of them.
Yeah, it's not. They must be out there, right? But they're mostly working on like legacy apps, presumably, and things like that. But yeah, because obviously, who would start a new app and be like, I'm not going to use any framework, whether that framework is, of course, Laravel, or to me, like WordPress is essentially a framework, right?
Yes, for sure.
So whether you're using WordPress or Laravel, or I guess maybe there's still a few other PHP. I don't know if Zen framework's still around or what's going on with that.
Symfony's still around.
Obviously, Symfony's still around for sure. So there are a few of those out there still, but yeah, I don't know. It's sort of weird, and the like. I just love the thing to me I like about Laravel and why I think it did so well is just like that level, like facades is like a great example. It's just like just that little bit of nicety there. It's so nice, and you could argue all you want about it, but it's just so much nicer to write that and have that code be cleaner.
It's just so much nicer.
It kind of relates back even to what we talked about last week or a week before about like the conference. I mean, I remember going to these PHP conferences.
Oh yeah,
and they were always at the airport hotel.
Yep.
And they were always horrible. And it was just like a depressing place to be. And you're in this depressing conference room. And it was not like, it just was not a fun place to be and spend time. And it's like, no, Laravel's like, no, we're going to just level that up. Like just that little bit. Like, it's just like, yeah, maybe it's $100 more ticket, right? Than it would have been if you had it at the airport hotel. But that difference is like a humongous difference of the quality of the event and the time everybody has and all those things. And that's kind of how Laravel itself is, right? It's like, well, you could use these other frameworks, but it's like, oh, there's these little sacrifices.
Do you want to?
And, right? Yeah. It's like, oh,
sure
Laravel's like so clean and like there's little niceties and every little corner's got like something for you in it. And so.
Yeah, that one conference I described as being in a Hilton and being super depressing, that was a PHP conference that I spoke at. It was just plain PHP, and it was like, oh, guys, like, this is not, I don't want to be here.
Yep.
Because it was, in the ballroom and it was real drab and depressing. And so,
yeah. And a lot of them, a sort of interesting thing that's, the Laravel community really benefits from is how Laravel Inc. has been able to support it through, primarily products and some big sponsorships and stuff too that they get from some of the partners. But definitely a lot of the products that they have. And so like I remember paying for these PHP conferences at the horrible airport hotel, $1,200 a ticket, $1,100 a ticket, because, that person running that event has to actually make money. So they're like, we're going to do it at the airport hotel, but I still need to actually make money because it's like part of my income for the year or whatever. And so, so Laravel's able to and actually a lot of times do it cheaper and nicer because there is this sort of funding engine in the center, which is really useful and I think helps the community out in a lot of ways. Like now, of course, Taylor has the team, and that just helps Laravel grow faster and all these improvements like prompt and all these other little niceties that you wouldn't otherwise do, but because there's people who do it, now we get these nice things, which is so cool.
Taylor is Empire. He is magnanimous and gives us free gifts.
Oh boy! Now did you finish that?
No spoilers.
Okay.
I watched, I think, 2 episodes this weekend, so I think I'm into episode 5 or 6. Starting to pick up. Finally, Empire's starting to like do stuff, and it's not just we're building libraries on other planets, and so it's getting better.
I feel like the end of the second season was definitely the best chunk of it across the 2 seasons. So. We'll see. I guess the writing strike, I think, is done. So we're near done.
Yeah,
so I guess we'll get some new TV shows at some point down the line here.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right. So one more item on the official list here is you had this tweet about reading the docs straight through.
Oh, good tweet. Great tweet.
Yeah, I thought it was getting action. It was.
I got a retweet from Swift on security. Do you know Swift on security? Yeah. So whenever you get a retweet from him or her, that's a good day. Yeah, I just had this, I put out a Planet Scale YouTube video recently, and part of the shtick at the beginning was like I was reading the docs and found this part, and which is true. I have the good parts of the MySQL docs behind me, and I was kind of reflecting on like I don't have an engineering degree. I don't have a CS degree. And a lot of the way that I have like become successful is I just read a lot of programming books, and in many cases the documentation. And nobody else does that. Nobody reads anything. Nobody reads anything. No. And so I just packaged it up into a tweet saying like, if you want like the easiest way to gain a relative advantage is to read the documentation straight through. Just read it.
Yeah.
Read it straight through like a book. Don't reference it. Read it straight through.
Right.
Same goes for technical books, and give you superpowers, because nobody ever does it. And that's the relative advantage thing. Like it is an absolute level up in knowledge, but in terms of a relative advantage over your peers, it's huge because you understand. So like what reading the docs straight through gives you is a map of the knowable universe. And it tells you the breadth of everything. Like, let's say Laravel, it tells you the breadth of everything that is there. And here's the thing, you don't have to remember it all. But then that gives your brain a spot, a bucket to put things in the future. Yeah. Right? So you read the doc straight through, you retain 30% of it. But what you have retained is like this fibrous network structure of things that exist. And then when you see a tweet or you see like a Hacker News or an article or something, you now have a slot to put that in because you have a structure of like, oh, these are, yeah, I remember like that's that kind of corner of this section of whatever. Yep. And it also like helps you realize like the available offerings in terms of maybe methods or classes or functions or tips or tricks. Like reading these chapter 8 of the MySQL docs is all about optimizations. And it's just like, there are so many things that the authors of the product or the library are telling you that are good optimizations that I would have never, ever thought about. And here's the thing, would have never thought to look up because I don't know what optimizations I don't know. And that's the whole point. And so I feel like reading it gives you a breadth that then you can slot things in later and also exposes you to like, oh, there's a method for that. Never knew that. I will just use that method from now on.
Right. Yeah, totally agree. I think that's definitely how I did stuff, especially early on. But yeah, even now, like it's sort of like people try to get it somewhat through osmosis of like being just involved in the community and following all the right accounts and stuff. But there still not quite the same as digging down in there and reading through the docs fully. And it's not like we talked about with accounting. Like this is what I took from my accounting degree, and it's exactly what you're describing. It's like you sort of know that stuff exists in this area, whatever that area is. You don't remember the details at all, but you know you can go look up the details. So it's like by reading it straight through, it's like, yeah, you get that impression on your brain. And so when you hit that problem, it's like, yeah, you don't remember the method or the system or whatever, but you know, oh, like there is a solution for this out there. I recall reading something about this.
I think I read something.
Yeah, and then you can go dig around and just reference the material. But yeah, if you hadn't actually read it to begin with, then you're not going to even know that, and you're going to try to come up with your own crazy solution or just search off in a different direction rather than knowing that there is a proper solution with whatever system you're using there. So yeah, I think that's a great tip.
The most unhinged response that I got to that was somebody telling me, they said, this advice is insanely dangerous.
Okay.
Insanely dangerous.
That's bizarre. Okay.
And they went on to tell me that 99% of people put off their creative pursuits until they die. It's like, what? Okay. What are we talking about? Where I said read the docs, man. Right. And it was basically he was trying to convince me that reading the docs is a form of procrastination from doing the things that you really want to be doing with your life. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm just saying if you work with Laravel, reading the Laravel docs is good. I told him, I think this is the most milquetoast take of all time. Right. Like, if there's a manual, reading manual good. Like, so grug-brained, but yeah.
Wow.
But once it gets outside of your circle, you start to get some chaotic replies. And insanely dangerous was not one I thought I was going to get. I'll be honest.
Yeah. I would not have expected that take. I have to say. I mean, I could. Other takes, like you might want to say, oh, it's stupid because now we have AI and you don't really just tell AI your problem and it gives you the answer or whatever. Okay, fine. But like, I don't see that at all. It's helping you pursue your pursuits. I know, right?
That's what I'm saying.
If you know how to build what you're trying to build in a better way, you'll probably do a better job at it and are somewhat more likely to succeed. Do you have what are your favorite docs to read?
The Laravel docs are extremely well written,
Love the
and
Laravel
very
docs.
very perusable. Like you can easily read those straight through. There are 2 chapters of the MySQL docs that I have found to be worth their weight in gold, and that's chapter 8, which is literally called like optimizations, and it's just 200 pages of things you can do to go faster. And then I think it's chapter 11, which is data types, and that's where you learn all the stuff that's like, well, timestamp only goes to 2038, so be careful. And it's like, oh shoot, that's really good to know.
Yep.
So chapter 8 and chapter 11 of the MySQL docs, and then a lot beyond documentation, a lot of like technical books. Even on stuff that like I feel like I already know, I'll pick up a technical book. And the thing is, I don't like, there will be entire chapters that I skip. So like when I'm reading a MySQL technical book, I don't read like replication and setting up your servers, and it's like I'm just not ever going to do that. Like I'm going to use a hosted provider, namely PlanetScale, and I'm just not going to worry about like why tune the NODB buffer pool. Right. And so I think a lot of the intimidation of reading technical books is like, oh, I got to read all this stupid stuff I don't know about. And it's like, yeah, you can skip over parts of it. You really can. Like if you know that there are sections that like you don't have to worry about, just skip it and read the good stuff. So, yeah. Do you have a soft place in your heart for anyone's documentation?
The Laravel docs is like why I got involved in Laravel, and that was even way back at the beginning. And there was just that craftsmanship there to them where you could read them as opposed to everybody else's docs, which are just like, bizarro land. You have no idea what's going on. I think it's definitely still a huge differentiator for most open source projects is just like spend that time on the docs. Just tenfold increases the likelihood of your project getting taken up by other people. But I think you had mentioned this book once, and I was surprised you had read it. It's definitely one of the ones I love best. I don't even remember the exact name, but it's the original MySQL O'Reilly book. It's like Jamie Zawinski or something like that. It's an awesome book. Definitely what taught me MySQL, and that's when I read cover to cover because it was like written so well. It's like, oh, we can just read this, like, which is the nice part about book over pure docs, because like the book has an editor. The book is usually going to be somewhat more readable than the kind of coders who are slapping together docs most of the time. So that is nice if you're targeting something that's big enough to have a dedicated book for it, then that's a way to go, which I think is also like a lost thing, right? Like who thinks about buying a programming book? Like, definitely not something I've thought about in a while, but at the same time,
these books right here.
There you go.
These books right here. Yep, they're everywhere.
Get out there and buy those books. Buy Matt Stauffer's Laravel book.
That's right.
That. So yeah, I think those things, but there was something else I was doing recently too. When I've been messing with Single Store, I basically did it. I did skip a few elements, but I read through a lot of it because it's like, this is like totally different.
Totally different.
So I can't just hop into, the one section I need. I need to know a little bit more about what's going on here.
Yeah.
So that's the most recent one where I read through a high percentage of the documentation. Which also then gives you a nice feel for like I actually think their documentation isn't my favorite, which is like that's a little bit of a bummer there, and like
it's not
a consideration for me at least of like that the docs aren't as fully realized as I would like in areas, which is just a good thing to know about projects too, I think. And so but definitely agree. Definitely don't think it sets you back. If anything, it's just like making the time for it when you have stuff going on. It's like can be difficult, but yeah, I definitely think it's worth doing.
I think the other ones would be Tailwind docs. Tailwind docs are extremely readable and extremely pretty and visual. Those would be a good
just a
ones.
Great way to get involved, like to learn like what modern CSS does. Like whenever I go through there, I'm like, like there's all this stuff that now they've made so nice for you, but also just it exists, and could be a useful thing to have in your mind for next time you need to do the weirdo thing to make something happen on the screen. It's like, CSS added this 5 years ago, and now all the browsers support it.
Exactly. Yeah, you could.
We can use it
for any enterprising individual out there. You could read through the Tailwind docs and come up with 100 tweets. And I
Right.
guarantee you like 25 of them would just totally pop off because nobody else knows it's there. It's
Right.
hidden
Nobody's
in plain
going
sight.
and doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, certainly also just like on the business side of things, I think there's like, if you're, you know, if you, I've talked to a million people who've been like, oh, I want to do a SaaS or I want to do a product or whatever, and I don't have any ideas or all my ideas are bad. Like, reading the docs seems like a great spot to me of like going in there and getting ideas for like both dev products, but even just like, hey, is there some new capability a product has or an open source package has that like other solutions aren't utilizing? Maybe you can leverage that in some different way. Like just idea generation. It could be an interesting way to go about that too. So yeah, and like you said, like certainly for audience building and things like that, like get in there and just expose these interesting things that nobody else is talking about because nobody else is on chapter 42 of whatever system. And internet's a big place. There's a lot of people out there who are needing information and interested in acquiring it. So and who don't want to read the docs. And
that's exactly right. That's why you get the relative advantage. That is exactly right.
Yep, exactly.
So stay tuned for more insanely dangerous ideas, such as reading the docs.
Man, I almost feel like that should have been podcast title material. Insanely dangerous ideas. Like that's
we haven't titled it. We could still title it.
Yeah,
we could do it.
We might have to do that. Yeah, that's it. That might be the one. All right. Well, another good ep. Thanks everybody for listening. If you want to get in touch with us, mostlytechnical.com, mostlytechpod on X, and mostlytechnicalpodcast@gmail.com. Send us some feedback. We'll cover it on the show. See you next week.
All right. Talk to you next week.